On the transition to nuclear, the debate that is central to the election campaign, I thought it would be worth catching up with a visiting Canadian expert on this topic. Tracy Primeau has had a lifelong career in nuclear energy as a plant operator, and she now sits on the board of Ontario Generation in Canada. Given the similarities between the Australian and Canadian economies, I asked her whether she found it incongruous that nuclear energy is actually illegal in Australia.
Yes, it sure is. You know, I've grown up in a nuclear family, a nuclear town, and a nuclear country. So it's been feeding my family for over 50 years. And I do struggle with the ban here in Australia because we have so much in common in so many other ways. You know, our history and of colonization and being a commonwealth country, and our story with Indigenous people. So yeah, I do struggle with the ban here in Australia, and I'm happy to talk to anyone and try to change their mind about it.
Yeah, Australia and Canada are very similar in many ways. You have a lot of renewable energy resources in Canada as well, a lot of hydroelectricity in some parts of the country, and of course you go ahead with the wind turbines and the like. What is it about nuclear, though, that's so important, especially for a heavily industrialised province like Ontario?
Well, you know, the refurbishment of the last a couple of reactors at the Bruce site in 2012 actually allowed Ontario to completely come off coal. And this movement to clean energy and reliable 24/7, 365 days a year energy is a real attractive, thing we offer in Ontario to data centers, factories, manufacturing. People are interested in coming to Ontario, or if they're already there, staying in Ontario, because we have this reliable, every day of the year, every hour of the day, energy available. And although we do have hydroelectric, and it's a big part of Ontario's grid as well as other provinces, it is affected by climate change, and it is affected by the seasons. So we really do rely on both of those for our base load, and then we use renewables like solar, wind for peak times and to support those base load generators we have. We also have a little bit of natural gas in Ontario, which we use when needed.
Yeah, so that mix of having a nuclear baseload and then hydro and other renewables, wind and solar, plus gas peaking, as you mentioned, that mix is what makes everything work. You get full reliability as well as presumably the best cost outcome?
That is 100% correct. You know, nuclear plants run at a very high capacity factor, over 90%, and sometimes very close to 100. And so we're always putting out power. Whereas wind and solar, as you know, Chris, they change with the weather, with the sun and the wind, and so their capacity factor is much less. So that capacity factor alone and the price of the fuel, which is quite low in the reactors we run in Ontario because they're unenriched uranium, really does ensure that the cost stays low for nuclear. It's the only cheaper kind of electricity in Ontario is hydro, with natural gas being about a third more, wind 2 times more, and solar 5 times more in our province.
Well, let me show you a summary, I suppose, of what the Labor Party's criticisms of the nuclear option are for Australia, and I'll get your thoughts on that. Here's Chris Bowen.
The thing about nuclear is, apart from being expensive and very slow, is that it's not flexible. You can't turn it on and off. Once a nuclear power station is operating, it's operating 24/7.
Yeah, he says it's too expensive. Does that make sense? Is that the Canadian experience?
You know, it's expensive to build. The upfront cost to build a nuclear plant is where all of the expense is. However, we run them for 60 to 80 years. You know, we're refurbing reactors right now at the Bruce site and at Darlington that are going to add another 40 years to plants that have been running since the 70s and 80s. So when you look at the long lifespan of nuclear and the cheaper cost of fuel, the cost argument doesn't win. On top of that, once it comes on, you can't turn it off. Nuclear can actually respond to the grid by putting their steam back into the ocean or lake, wherever it is, or out the roof, and not use every single megawatt. But even more importantly, nuclear has the economy of scale. Not every nuclear plant needs to be 1,000 megawatts. We can build 300 megawatt plants. We can build 50 megawatt plants. And we can run them as what they call in Canada and around the world a 4-pack, where you have a number of different plants and you just bring on the ones that you need for the support that you need.
But
so,
also the point is with renewables that we lack.
Arguments really hold up.
Sorry, apologies, we were talking over you then, Tracy. But the point is that with renewables, you don't get reliability. So no one's talking about a 100% nuclear grid. But if you have 30 or 40% of the baseload you need all the time coming from nuclear, the fact that it's always there is a plus, not a negative.
Exactly. And you know, in Ontario, over 50% of our grid is supplied by nuclear. In Canada as a whole, it's only around 15% currently. However, that I truly am a believer in nuclear with renewables. You know, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think working together, they can provide the electricity and the power that Australia needs.
Spot on, and thanks so much for sharing your experience with us, Tracy.
Thank you.